Move your old rust bucket. Grandpa, you're blocking the real cars. The young race car driver shouts as 80-year-old Robert Chun slowly walks around his 1970 Mustang in the crowded car show parking lot. The excited crowd of racing fans and car enthusiasts laughs and points. Someone yells about nursing homes having visiting hours. Robert's weathered hands touch the small purple heart pin on his jacket lapel, a reminder of the day he single-handedly held off enemy forces for 6 hours in Vietnam to save his entire platoon. What happens next will leave you speechless. If stories like Robert's remind you why we must never forget our heroes, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments about a veteran who changed your life. Let's honor them together. Robert had been coming to the Riverside Classic Car show for 12 years, ever since he retired. His 1970 Mustang wasn't the flashiest car there, but it was his pride and joy. He had bought it with his first paycheck after coming home from Vietnam. In 1971, the car show was packed today. Hundreds of vintage cars lined the fairground, their owners polishing chrome and talking about horsepower. Robert moved slowly around his Mustang, checking the engine and making sure everything looked perfect for the judging. That's when Tyler Martinez showed up. Tyler was 26 years old, drove a bright red modified Camaro, and had won several amateur racing circuits. He was everything Robert wasn't: young, loud, and convinced the world revolved around him. Tyler pulled his Camaro into the space next to Robert's Mustang, music blasting from custom speakers. He climbed out wearing a racing suit covered in sponsor patches and immediately started attracting a crowd of young fans. "Dude, check out this engine," Tyler said loudly, popping his hood. Twin turbo, 900 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. This is what a real car looks like. The crowd gathered around Tyler's Camaro, taking pictures and asking questions. Robert continued quietly working on his own car, but he couldn't help overhearing the comments. "That old Mustang next to us probably has like 200 horsepower, Tyler said, pointing at Robert's car. "These old guys don't understand what performance means." Robert's jaw tightened, but he kept working. He had dealt with disrespect before. Tyler walked over to Robert's car and started looking at it with exaggerated disappointment. "Hey, old man," he called out. "This thing even run anymore?" Robert looked up from under his hood. "It runs just fine, thank you." Tyler laughed and turned to his growing crowd of fans. "Just fine," he says. "Probably takes 5 minutes to get to highway speed." The crowd started laughing. Robert felt his face getting red, but he tried to stay calm. Tyler kept going. "You know what, Pops? You should probably park this thing somewhere else. You're making the real cars look bad." Robert straightened up slowly, his back aching. "This is my assigned spot. I've been coming to this show for over a decade." "Yeah, well, maybe it's time to try bingo instead," Tyler shot back. "Leave the car shows to people who actually know something about cars." The crowd laughed louder. Robert's hands started shaking, not from age but from anger and embarrassment. "Listen, kid," Robert said quietly. "I've been working on cars since before you were born." Tyler walked closer, his voice getting louder. "Working on cars? This rust bucket looks like it hasn't been touched in 20 years. What did you do? Change the oil once?" Robert clenched his fists. He had rebuilt this engine himself, spent countless hours restoring every part of this car to perfection. "You don't know what you're talking about," Robert said. Tyler turned to his audience. "Guys, check this out. Grandpa here thinks his grocery getter is a real car." The crowd was getting bigger now. People were pulling out phones to record the confrontation. Robert felt trapped and humiliated. Tyler popped Robert's hood without permission and started pointing at the engine. "Look at this ancient technology. Probably gets like 10 miles per gallon. This is what cars looked like in the Stone Age." Robert's breathing got heavy. His chest started hurting. The crowd was laughing and pointing, and he felt smaller than he had in years. "You know what your problem is, old man," Tyler said, getting in Robert's face. "You're stuck in the past. You can't accept that young guys like me are better at everything, including cars." Robert looked around at all the faces staring at him. Young people with their phones out, recording his humiliation. Car enthusiasts who should have understood his passion but were instead laughing at him. "Maybe I should just go home," Robert whispered. "Yeah, maybe you should," Tyler replied. "And next time, don't waste everyone's time with junk like this." Tyler slammed Robert's hood shut with a loud bang. The crowd cheered. But just as Robert started walking toward his driver's seat, defeated and embarrassed, something changed in the crowd. People began stepping aside, making way for someone walking through. A man in full military dress uniform was approaching. Colonel James Washington, according to his name tag. He was about 50 years old, African American, with ribbons and medals covering his chest. His face was stern as he walked straight toward Tyler and Robert. The crowd went quiet. Even Tyler stopped talking. Colonel Washington walked up to Robert's car and began examining it carefully. He looked at the engine, the interior, the paint job. Then he turned to face Tyler. "Son," Colonel Washington said, his voice calm but commanding. "Did I hear you correctly? Did you just call this car junk?" Tyler suddenly looked less confident. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty old and outdated." Colonel Washington nodded slowly. "And you think this gentleman doesn't know anything about cars?" "Well," Tyler said, shifting uncomfortably. "I mean, look at it. It's not exactly high performance." The colonel walked around Robert's Mustang one more time, then faced the crowd. "Let me tell you something about this car," he said loudly. "And about this man." Robert looked up, confused but curious. This 1970 Mustang Boss 429 is one of the rarest muscle cars ever made. Colonel Washington continued. "Ford only produced 1,358 of them. This particular model has a 429 cubic inch V8 engine that produces 375 horsepower from the factory." Tyler's confident expression began to fade. But more importantly, the colonel said, "This car belongs to Staff Sergeant Robert Chun, United States Army, Vietnam veteran, 1969 to 1971. The crowd went completely silent now. Robert's eyes widened in surprise. Colonel Washington continued. "Sergeant Chun served with the 1st Infantry Division during some of the heaviest fighting of the Vietnam War. On March 15, 1970, his platoon was ambushed by enemy forces near Siu Chi." Robert's heart started racing. How did this stranger know about that day? "Sergeant Chun's platoon was pinned down by machine gun fire," the colonel said. "They were outnumbered 4-1, and casualties were mounting. When his platoon leader was killed, Sergeant Chun took command. Tyler looked like he wanted to disappear." The crowd was hanging on every word. For 6 hours, Sergeant Chun held off enemy attacks while calling in artillery support and organizing medical evacuation for wounded soldiers. He single-handedly operated a machine gun position while directing his men to safety. Robert felt tears forming in his eyes. No one had talked about that day in decades. When ammunition ran low, the colonel continued, "Sergeant Chun used enemy weapons he captured during the fight. When those ran out, he fought with grenades. When those were gone, he fought with his rifle. When that jammed, he fought with his sidearm." The entire crowd was staring at Robert now, seeing him completely differently than they had just minutes before. By the time reinforcements arrived, Colonel Washington said, Sergeant Chun had saved the lives of every surviving member of his platoon. 14 men went home to their families because of his actions that day. Robert wiped his eyes with his sleeve. He hadn't expected this. The colonel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal case. He opened it to reveal a bronze star. With a V for valor, Sergeant Chun was awarded the Bronze Star for heroism in combat, the Purple Heart for wounds received in action, and the Vietnam Service Medal with 4 battle stars. Colonel Washington turned to Tyler, who was now completely silent and red-faced. "So when you call this man's car junk," he said sternly, "you're disrespecting not just a fellow car enthusiast, but a decorated combat veteran who risked his life to serve his country." Tyler looked down at his shoes. I didn't know." "That's exactly the problem," the colonel replied. "You didn't know, but you assumed. You saw an elderly man with an older car and decided he was worthless." The crowd began murmuring. Several people stepped forward to shake Robert's hand and thank him for his service. Colonel Washington placed his hand on Robert's shoulder. "Sergeant," he said, "I served 2 tours in Iraq. I know what it's like to come home and feel invisible. But you're not invisible to me, and you shouldn't be invisible to anyone else." Robert straightened up, feeling strength he hadn't felt in years. "Thank you, Colonel. But how did you know about my service?" Colonel Washington smiled. "My father served with the 1st Infantry Division 2. Different war, same unit. He told me stories about Vietnam veterans like you. Heroes who came home to a country that didn't appreciate their sacrifice." He turned back to Tyler. "Young man, I suggest you apologize to Sergeant Chen. Right now." Tyler looked up, his face red with shame. "Sir, I'm sorry. I was completely out of line. I had no right to say those things." Robert nodded. "You're young. You'll learn." Tyler continued. "And your car is actually incredible. I've heard about Boss 429s, but never seen one in person. Could you could you tell me about it?" Robert's face lit up for the first time all day. He spent the next hour showing Tyler and the crowd every detail of his Mustang. The original engine, the restored interior, the paint job he had done himself. As the day went on, more veterans in the crowd came forward to introduce themselves to Robert. Other car enthusiasts asked detailed questions about his restoration work. Young people who had been laughing at him earlier were now taking pictures with him and his car. When the car show judges announced the winners that evening, Robert's 1970 Mustang Boss 429 took first place in the classic muscle car category. As Robert accepted his trophy, Colonel Washington stood in the front of the crowd, saluting. Tyler was there too, clapping harder than anyone else. That night, as Robert drove home with his trophy on the passenger seat, he thought about the young race car driver who had insulted him. Tyler had learned an important lesson about respect and assumptions. But more importantly, Robert had learned something too. He had learned that his service still mattered, that his sacrifices weren't forgotten, and that there were still people who understood the true meaning of honor. The Purple Heart pin on his jacket caught the streetlight as he drove home, reminding him that some battles are worth fighting, whether they happen on foreign soil or in a car show parking lot.